The Lift and Love podcast is rooted in faith, family, and the conviction that loving LGBTQ people is a calling to be embraced, not feared. Produced by the Lift and Love team, we focus on topics relevant to Latter-day Saint LGBTQ individuals and their parents, relatives, friends, and others who are navigating this space with faith. Across episodes, hosts from the Lift and Love team and their guests address current topics, offer practical support, and share experiences related to LGBTQ+ issues. Each conversation is grounded in compassion, honesty, and a commitment to keep families connected to each other and Christ. Learn more and access resources at liftandlove.org. Okay. Well, hello, everybody. We're so excited today. We're especially excited because this is our family day at Lift and Love. Doris and I are going to be talking to Lynell Rogers, who some of you may not know, but you know her because she puts out all the goodness in the world, and her daughter, Kendall. And Lynell and Kendall started the General Conference Project. Many of you probably follow, but don't know that the same Lynell that makes you happy over here and fills you with hope and goodness is also on that page. So I want to just have you two introduce yourselves quickly, and then we'll jump into why was there a need for a General Conference Project. Do you want to start, Lynell?
As Allison mentioned, I am kind of behind the scenes at Lift and Love. And so you don't usually see my face that often. And the same with the General Conference Project. A lot of people don't realize that, it's Kendall and I behind that. And so we're really excited to talk about that with you today.
We should see your face more because those cute dimples.
Oh,
lots more. How about you, Kendall?
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat today. I'm a longtime lover of Lift Love, and so excited to share more about General Conference Project and why we thought there was a need for it and how it's grown into a really beautiful community.
Cool. Okay, tell us what you're doing in school.
Yeah, I'm a master's student. I'm studying public policy and women's gender and sexuality studies at George Washington University in Washington, D.C.
Yay! And Kendall and I met when you were serving your mission in Salt Lake.
Yes, yeah.
I was Relief Society president. And Kendall saw a plea that I put out on, what was the Facebook page? Mormon?
I think it was, Aspiring Mormon Women or something like that.
Someone told me to put the request out there. Kendall saw it, called her mom and said, you've got to get this.
And the request was for what?
For social media manager. I interviewed a lot of people, and the second I started talking to Lynell, I was like, this is it.
And how did that happen just before the first Mother's Retreat? Like, you were pretty freshly minted employee, I guess. But yeah, that was that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Superstar.
Much more accurate term.
Yeah, this is so fun. It's like worlds colliding. We're back to where Kendall introduced me to Lynn, and now we get to talk together.
That's
really fun.
Well, and that's the coolest part of all of this. Like, we're just led to each other and led to help each other through what can be really tricky waters, LGBTQ, intersection of the LDS Church, and then conference, which I would have never guessed would be tricky in my life. But there are some times when it is. So who wants to tell us why you started this and whose idea was it?
I can jump in. I think this actually is also very connected to Lift and Love. My mom was working on a post about how to prepare for General Conference for Lift and Love. And we were talking about different things that might be helpful for people who maybe feel some kind of stress or anxiety about watching. And I had mentioned that there were some Instagram posters that I really liked when I was in high school that would post quotes from General Conference talks. I thought that was really helpful. I personally use them to prepare for seminary General Conference Jeopardy. I was really serious about that. But when we went to go look to find these Instagram posters, most of them weren't doing it anymore, weren't sharing on their accounts. And so we kind of saw this gap for content about General Conference, sharing the good highlights and quotes and really focusing on the crazy messages of General Conference. And so kind of seeing that gap, I think we both came to the conclusion, why couldn't we fill it? Why couldn't we provide that service for people?
I love that. So it was really born out of a interest in sharing inspiring messages or highlighting the messages that you were inspired by in conference. And how many years ago was that?
It's almost 5 years ago now. In October, it'll be 5 years, which is
Wow.
crazy. It does not seem like it was that long ago. Yeah, I think born out of wanting to share the good parts of General Conference and also wanting to create a safe space where people could enjoy those good parts and see what was going on and maybe avoid some of the more uncomfortable or stressful parts of General Conference.
So was that last piece, the harder topics, was that part of your original sort of plan to address those? Or did it come up naturally?
I'd say it came up naturally. It's evolved a little bit over the years. At first, we were just trying to put out as many quotes as we could, and now it's kind of evolved into being a little bit more selective in what we post and trying to be as helpful as we can. For example, we include things like what kind of topics that might be sensitive in each of the talks. And that isn't something that we started out doing. We started out just doing as many quotes as we could type up, Since we're watching General Conference live as well, we don't get any of the quotes or anything in advance. So we're just furiously typing and trying to kind of keep up. So that has changed over the years as we've kind of evolved and listened to what people are giving us in feedback and what they need. Just to give you a little bit of a background, I'm a convert to the church, but for way back, and I have been very, very conservative and very orthodox, I guess you would say. And then I was in that camp of kind of like, I don't know why anyone would be upset about anything that's said at General Conference. What do you mean? And it was always something that I really looked forward to, and I've always felt so inspired. And we had, as a family, kind of traditions that we would do certain things, and we'd have certain special meals and little snacks and little games and activities and things like that. And so in the evolution of kind of taking this project on, it has turned into there are no special meals and no special snacks. Everybody's on their own because I am busy. Because we really take it seriously. I take this as, I feel that it's kind of a sacred responsibility that we have. We were kind of hoping that maybe a few people would see what we were doing and that it would benefit maybe a handful of people, literally. Like that was all we expected to come out of this, was that maybe there were a few people out there who were feeling left out or who weren't able to engage for whatever reason in General Conference. And it really has gone beyond what we ever thought that it would be.
I know it is a super helpful resource, and I know it takes a lot of time and emotion that you both pour into it.
People will say, I just can't sit that long because I have this chronic condition, and I feel a lot of judgment from people that I'm not able to sit. I will watch General Conference in chunks, and we want people to know that that is perfectly okay. We want to give people an opportunity to engage in General Conference in a way that is helpful to them and accessible to them.
And I think it's just this beautiful way of living your baptismal covenants, because you guys are listening, you're holding all these sensitivities and possible traumas and triggers. All of this, you have become this tool of learning and listening and holding all of that with people. And that takes a lot on. And thinking, I was talking to a friend who has an adult daughter who's single. And she was saying, gosh, I didn't realize how family focused and have kids and these messages. But when I think of my daughter who's hearing these things, it's so hard for her. And so, I mean, that's just one very, very small example of one segment of a population who that messaging could probably get tiring to hear if you're like, that doesn't apply to me. And this can be hard time after time. And you're holding all of those sensitivities and helping people navigate. Hey, heads up, if this is something that might be hard for you, here's the content, and we'll give you a brief summary so that you can decide if you want to dive further in or maybe hold back.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So let me ask, Kendall or Lynell, whichever of you want to answer this, what changed over from we're just posting great thoughts? Was it changes that happened with you and your family, or was it just noticing the needs?
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of both. I think personally, over the time where we've been working on the General Conference project, I've gone through my own, journey with the church and with faith and with General Conference. I too was also someone who, like my mom mentioned, we had these family traditions surrounding General Conference. I loved like being on the couch the whole weekend and watching and experiencing that kind of as a cultural event in the church. And then, for me, it started to shift where I was starting to feel anxious and stressed about what could possibly be said. A lot of it has to do with, for me at least, anxiety about not knowing, who's going to speak, what topics they're going to focus on. It's not really set up like a academic conference where you know the speakers and you know the topics ahead of time. There's a lot of uncertainty about what,
and they're really professionals about what they're talking about.
I feel like in some ways it's kind of like bringing a friend to church for the first time, either as a missionary or it's just a person at the church you are kind of nervous about is what are people going to say in the talks, even if it's, completely in line with church doctrine, you don't know how they're going to say it or what someone may or may not understand. I feel like for me, my relationship with faith and with General Conference was shifting. We were also getting a lot of feedback about how people were feeling. People wanted a space where they could comment on what talks were really important to them and really special to them, and also what talks were causing harm or they felt like they needed to turn off for whatever reason. And I think that made us attuned to what needs people had. I think specifically, my mom has, I think one of her great gifts is being able to perceive how people will receive a message, how they'll understand something. And I think that's something I've learned from her. So when I listen to General Conference talks, I'm not just listening as myself, but who are the people who would be affected by this? Streets, like you said, single members of the church hearing repeated message about eternal families, that's going to hit differently for them versus someone who's married. Or, messages about baptismal covenants might be different for some members of the church or some people listening versus members who maybe can't get baptized. Talk about temple covenants are going to be different for people who can't access those temple covenants. And so I think being able to hear where people are coming from has shifted a lot of our content to what they need and what we can help with and what we can warn people about.
So I think that's so important. Lift+Love focuses on LGBTQ members, and there have been some real hard talks about our LGBTQ folks in the church since you guys started. I didn't even realize you started about 6 months after our mom's event. So you'd maybe not even been around for a year yet, Lynell. Oh, yeah. But there's all of those messages that can land really hard. So I knew that our community, the Lift+Love community, was really benefiting from what you were doing. But it's so interesting because I spend a lot of time in the faith transition community, working with different groups and talking to people. And people will say to me, oh, there's this great podcast. It's called the General Conference Project. And I'm like, yes, isn't it fantastic? And I said, Lynell and her daughter, Lynell, who does our stuff, does that as well. But it's interesting how many times I've heard from other people, like outside, and that doesn't mean that they're not, that they don't have someone in their family who's LGBTQ, but you are resonating across the board. I think from someone that used to sit on the couch with my kids and my 800 pens, and I would follow every word, to the point where sometimes, like, there's been times where I'm like, no, stop. Please don't do this. Please, please don't say that. And sometimes it's so hard. Like, I can't even hear anything after. Yeah. There's been some messages. And I have to, like, bring my, like, okay, so there's a great Faith Matters podcast that they did like a week or so ago, like maybe beginning of March of this year. And this institute teacher talks about how faith crisis can also be a crisis of your central nervous system, because that's where we go. We're like, oh, please, my kids are in the room and the ones that are going to get hurt by this. And that's a fight or flight moment for a mom. And I'm assuming for any LGBTQ person. So what you've done, it's kind of a remarkable place you've slid into here, that you can, with faith and the nuance, all the nuance that's required to help other people feel the Spirit in sometimes really hard times, you filled that space. And it's a miracle for some people, because just because there's a hard conference talk doesn't mean people don't love conference, that they don't love the gospel, that they don't love the leaders, or that they don't love God, right? Like, those things all exist together.
Yeah. And I don't want to ever give the impression that we mean any disrespect to any of the speakers or, to the church. That is not our intention at all. Our intention is
No.
to make things, to have a way for people to engage in the way that's possible for them, and that looks different for different people. I had a woman that, we've worked with through Lift and Love and General Conference, came up to me and said that this last conference was the first time that she has been unable to watch General Conference live because of all of the, the emotions, complicated going on. And she said she was just devastated that she just felt she couldn't watch it, of something that she's done her whole life. And she said that following with our posts on Instagram, which, maybe seem like is not equivalent, but when you aren't able to watch General Conference because of the anxiety or the hurt, or, whatever it is you're experiencing, she said that it was so meaningful for her at least to be able to participate and to know what's going on. That meant a lot to me, because that. And anyways, it just meant a lot to me, because that's all that we're trying to do, is to try to hold out kind of a branch, or hold out a hand to people who feel like they can't, participate the way that they used to. And I think that I kind of look at everything through the lens of how I would have seen things 10, 20 years ago. And like I mentioned, I would think, oh, well, people are just being lazy, or they just don't want to hear what the prophet has to say. And that's not,
They just want things their own way. They don't
get what they want, and that's just not what I'm seeing. And I try to think about this in the sense that, we don't totally understand things that other people are experiencing. I'm not LGBTQ myself, but I'm learning, what it's like for an LGBTQ person to hear some of these messages, and, how many years they've been hearing these things, and what the backstory is. And it's not, I'm just trying to be difficult, or I just don't want to hear it. It's the hurt, and it's the fear. And I could kind of relate that to maybe another experience that I don't totally understand. For example, like losing a child. If you had lost a child, that would be something that was very traumatic and something very hurtful and personal to you. So if you were to hear a talk in sacrament meeting, for example, about losing a child, that could be a very difficult thing for you to hear. I can't understand that on a personal level, but I can think about that and try to have empathy. The same thing for like maybe somebody who has PTSD for being in the military. I think about that one too. Like, I don't understand that, but for somebody who's had those experiences, say to, watch a movie about the military might be very, very stressful for them and very difficult and traumatic. And so if we use kind of an analogy like that, maybe kind of helps us to understand why some of these things might be hard to, especially like Kendall mentioned, when you don't know what's going to be said. What is this talk going to be about? What are they going to say? What is good? Something's being announced. What is it? And that can be so stressful when you feel like you are just right on the edge of, of, I don't know, not knowing how much more, you're going to be able to
and
listen to.
that's all content related, right? We haven't even scratched the surface of like representation, cultural, gender, all of it. I mean, it was 2013 before a woman prayed in General Conference. And that was with social pressure. There had never been a woman, at least in our modern time, praying in General Conference. And so April 6th, 2013 was the first time a woman prayed. And then they kind of, it was like, oh, it wasn't a big deal. And we're like, it took a few years at least of people actively requesting, campaigning, whatever, however you want to characterize it. And I know that for years there has been a tremendous desire to hear from more women leadership. And that has felt like there has been an intentional ignoring of that, to be quite honest. And so we've had, I think the max has been 4 women, 1 in each session. That's the max. And to me, that's hard. Like, to be honest, that's hard. For my husband, he can see why that would be hard, but he might not have noticed it if I hadn't pointed it out. And so this is just one example of different people's sensitivities. For me, I'm over here cheering for hearing from more women. So representation, I think people are looking for more diversity, and we certainly are making, I guess, improvement, but there's so much better we could do. And it always feels slower and more painful than I wish it would be, you know?
Well, I think to your point, the narrative would be,
we do all the time.
Well, don't you want to hear from the brethren? Or, yeah. But I think one of the things, and I'm just going to throw it out there, but I think one of the things that we, in our defense of the church, we don't listen to people who are struggling in the church, because I think that it feels like it's more important to defend the church. My reading of the scripture is that God has told us that nothing will stop his work on the earth. So I feel like that's not really part of my job, because he's got that. And I think because I've had an opportunity to first be a woman in the church, second have a brother who was in so much pain over being queer in the church, and a son who experienced a lot of the same, though gratefully not all of the same. I have so much compassion for people who don't feel comfort at conference. And
yes.
I mean, I miss those days when I could I miss them so much, really. I miss my innocence. But I think at some point I had to grow up, and I had to look at the gospel with the eyes of an adult. And that means that I look at the gospel with the eyes of someone who's been hurt, someone whose children have been hurt, whose brother and who sees hurt. And I hope that going forward as a community, we can start saying, wow, like, this hurts you.
Mm-hmm. I love
don't get it. But why? Tell me why. Because that's what I think.
Yeah.
That's what I think the General Conference program does.
And give
says,
validation to it, and then a resource. It's just so beautiful.
Yes.
And I totally agree with what Kendall said, where I could go through conference and nothing upset me, but the anxiety of what might happen, not to mention the echo of it taught again in second hour and then used in sacrament meeting talks. And it's like, oh no, it's coming back. You know, I thought I avoided it that weekend because the General Conference Project said, here's the topic. And I thought, I don't think I'm going to be able to digest that in a spiritually nourishing way. And then I'm sitting in sacrament meeting and I'm blindsided by it, or, Relief Society, Elders Quorum. And so, I mean, these things, we love to do talks, so they don't disappear. It's not just dodging at one time. What the two of you do is you help equip people with this information so that maybe their anxiety can be reduced and they can understand and say, I think I can navigate this with personal revelation, or I just don't think that's digestible for me right now. And that's absolutely both very valid.
We've been getting, a lot more feedback too from people saying, I am using this resource to help me plan the lessons for Relief Society. My husband's the Elders Quorum president, and he uses General Conference Project to look over the talks and try to decide, what resources are going to be best for the group.
Well, I know we'll link it in the show notes, but I think we didn't get into where they can find General Conference Project and any of that info.
Yeah. We're on Instagram, the General Conference Project. Only post during General Conference weekend and usually maybe a couple days before. But we're excited for this April conference, especially with recent leadership changes in the church, new prophets, new apostles. This, I think, is especially a conference where there's a lot of unknowns, new speakers, political strife going on in the country and in the world. There's a lot of opportunity for uncertainty. And so we're excited to be able to have this space to talk about it and talk about what is discussed in conference, what's not mentioned in conference, who speaks, who doesn't speak, the representation of
I
it
can't
all.
wait.
We're excited to have this community again.
I typically will put out either on Lift and Love or on the General Conference Project a poll to kind of gauge how people are feeling. How do you feel any anxiety or stress going into General Conference weekend? And so we recently did a poll about that. And the level of anxiety or stress has definitely gone up. And this is among people who follow us. So there's definitely kind of a niche group. But it's, I think, important to realize and to recognize that people do feel a trepidation about what change. And that plays into whether or not people will feel comfortable watching General Conference. We want anybody who wants to participate to have some way to participate. So even if you don't feel like you can watch, it's too much, or you have a part member family, or you have a child that is upset about watching General Conference, whatever the situation is, there is a way for you to keep up to date on what's going on
I love
and
that.
to engage as much as you feel comfortable in. And so that's exactly what we do.
Yeah. And I think I would just add on to that really quickly too. I think it's also a really helpful resource for people who maybe aren't as interested in General Conference for the content, for hearing messages from
kind of a
church leadership,
shorthand
but
of it.
people who also just want to stay informed about what's happening. I'm thinking about specifically people who have left the church, people who have gone through faith transitions, but kind of want to know perhaps like what other people in their family are hearing in General Conference. Or maybe they want to be able to kind of keep up the small talk of, oh, what talk did you like, without having to really watch it. And I think we have so many people who comment and who send us messages who are not really affiliated with the church anymore, but who want to stay in the know. They want to know what messages are being said, what narratives are being used. And I hope that the General Conference Project is just as much a help for people who are believing members of the church and those who have complicated relationships with the church or have left the church. We want it to be a space for anyone who wants to have insight into what's being discussed.
If you are like one who's like, what are you talking about? I love General Conference. And we have characterized people who maybe this hasn't touched them in any way that has ever challenged any of their beliefs or anything. And great for them. But if you want to know or maybe understand a little bit better what might be a sensitive or topic for somebody, take a look at this content because it's going to signal to you what touch points there are and what sensitivities there are that maybe, me being a married woman, I'm with kids, I'm not hearing the agony that someone is sitting in when they're hearing messages and they're not fitting in this, preached ideal. So it could be an education.
Yeah. And I would add
definitely.
I would add to that, once you've sort of seen those touch points, like listen for them. In Relief Society, in your families, if somebody says something, you'll be like, oh, here it is. Here's this trepidation or this uncomfortableness. And then get curious and try not to just listen and help people feel still connected to you while they have this dissonance. And I think it's a great exercise.
I feel like that is the essence of what Christ would do. We saw him do during his ministry in the New Testament is that he wasn't dismissing people. He was drawing people in. He was going to the individual and saying, what's going on, and how can I help you? I feel that if there's anyone that's on the margins, anyone that is feeling like they're other, that they're not good enough. I've heard so many people say in kind of the Lift and Love space that they grew up feeling like they were garbage or that they were ruining their family or just things like that, that I just think how it's not right for people to feel that way. And so if there's something that we can do to better understand why in the world would somebody feel like that? Like Allison was saying, like, I don't understand this, but if someone is feeling that way, it's Christ-like for us to go to that person.
Well, we know that everyone belongs to the body of Christ, and certainly we're not all uniform. We are to be united, but not necessarily all uniform. So when there is an ideal preached, it's going to exclude people, and that can be tremendously painful. And I love that the General Conference Project acknowledges those pain points and helps give resources to navigate and be more aware. And like Allison said, educate and show curiosity.
Yeah. Well, you two have been a blessing in my life for sure. Absolutely. In the lives of all that follow Lift and Love, because I know you, Lynell and Kendall, work together on a lot of things and talk constantly and help each other. And you're just a blessing to those who are traveling this general conference road for the first time and for a long time maybe. So I just thank you both for all the work you do. And just thank you for being there. I think what you do is peacemaking. You bring peace to people's hearts, and it's a peacemaking we don't talk about, but
Thank
it's
you so
definitely
much.
something that you are both very good at. So thank you, and I love you both, all of you.
Oh, it's a great honor. I mean, it's an honor of my life to two things: to be able to work with Lift and Love and Gather Conference and the people involved with that, and also to have the incredible kids that I have, including Kendall is.
I love it.
I always say she's like the better version of me, and she has taught me about standing up and protecting people who are vulnerable, and so I'm grateful for that, and any chance I have to work with her, I'm on board.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. I think this Lift and Love has been so important in both of our lives. I think for my mom and I both, both as her job, but also for me as a queer person, trying to navigate what my life looks like in connection with religion and with the church has been so important to me. And so to be in kind of this sister partnership with Lift and Love as General Conference Project is so special to me. And, being able to use the skills that my mom and I have, her incredible social media skills and her ability to understand where people are coming from and what they might need. And to be able to do that together is such a privilege and such an honor. And to be able to create the spaces that I would like to see in the church is such a blessing and such an honor, because this is something I wish I would have had at various points throughout my life. And so I'm glad that we can provide that for people.
Thank you for joining us. If you like what we share, subscribe to the Lift and Love podcast. And if you have a minute, leave us a 5-star rating so other families like yours can find us. When your child comes out, you need to find support where you feel safe and understood. This is why we created the Lift and Love community, a place where families can connect, learn, and grow in a private setting. If you feel like you need more information, support, or resources, check out liftandlove.org and Lift and Love org on Instagram and Facebook. But most importantly, remember, you are not alone in this journey. We are building a community of thriving, faithful LGBTQ individuals and their families who are here to lift and love you.